Welcome back to Protect the Paint. I'm Brian McCormick alongside Patrick Burns. Pat, what is going on?
What's up, man? How you doing?
Long time no talk. This is the first episode in like a week, man. It's been pretty slow, but we definitely have some things to talk about here.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of the action happened early on, but we got a few things that happened since last week, so um, should should have a good show here.
Yeah, regardless if you're shocked or not, Dame is still a trailblazer. So we're waiting for the next domino to fall with that. I'm sick of talking about it at this point. Maybe he'll be traded by 2027. Who knows what's going to happen there? But yeah, let's get into it really quick. Just poking some fun here. But Dame still in Portland. It looks like there's a bit of conflicts with reports out there. So, Pat, I know you've been monitoring Twitter as well, but Woj seems to be talking for Portland, right? And then Shams, alongside every other source out there, seems to be talking about the realistic approaches with Miami, right? So Woj is talking about Portland, how GM Joe Cronin, he wants to seek the best offer. He's not just going to trade Lillard to Miami just because that's his wish, right? But then every other source says Dame only wants to play in Miami and that it could get ugly. It could come to the point where Dame's like, I'm playing in Miami or I'm sitting out. And it's not there, but it could very well lead to that point. What are you feeling so far with what you're seeing, all over the news here? Like, do you think this is going to be drug out a little bit, or do you think this is going to be imminent and possibly happen this week?
It sounds like it's going to be back and forth with how you described. You described it pretty well, right? Because he wants to go to Miami, but they don't have a good enough package to send back to Portland right now, in Portland's eyes, and in my eyes too. I don't see anything Miami could offer that would be fair, and at least that would allow them to still keep the team intact to possibly make it back to the finals, right? Uh, so I see it being drug out. He is going to have to, if he wants to go to Miami, I think he's going to have to do what you said and refuse to play, because Portland seems to be treating it right now as if they don't trade him, fine, he'll play, right? But if that's the case, then they're forced to trade him. Then that's a different story.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here for Portland. So I'm seeing reports that players around the league are monitoring Dame Lillard, how he's treated as far as where Portland's going to send him, and ultimately they want to see if Portland does right by Dame. But then I'm wondering in my head, like, what free agents in the last 10 years and in the present right now want to go to Portland, right?
Yeah.
So if Joe Cronin trades Dame for this haul, this Paul George Thunder S type haul, right? We'll talk about Paul George in a little bit here. But if Joe Cronin gets the best offer, and let's say like he sends Dame to Utah, where like I don't think Dame wants to play there. He doesn't have. I know he played college in Utah, but he has no interest in playing there as right now. What players are going to be upset about that to where they're like, oh, I'm not going to Portland now in 2023, in 2024, right? So I don't understand that side of it. I can see that Dame has been there 11 years and, Cronin wants to, fulfill his wish here. But we have a stand down right now, and it's pretty fun to watch as far as what's being reported. So you have, like I said, Woj definitely trying to get Portland's leverage up there. You brought up what Miami could offer. So let's touch on that really quick, too, because I'm seeing that Portland wants nothing to do with Tyler Herro.
Wow. I mean, if that's the case, then Miami really has nothing to offer, because that's the only thing I would think they would have to offer. So
Yeah,
now they
it's coming
officially
to a
have, if
point.
Portland doesn't want him, they have nothing now. So
Yeah, like Kyle Lowry. Who wants Kyle Lowry, right?
yeah,
What's he, 42 at this stage? Right. I'm kidding. But no, just to go off of that though, it seems like there could be 5 or 6 teams that are going to be involved in this trade to help facilitate the
yeah,
process. And I saw that the Spurs are actually interested in Tyler Herro, and I kind of like that pairing with Wemby.
yeah. The Spurs are in a good position, man. Again, I don't know if it's still the same, team management in there, since they had Tim Duncan and Tony Parker and all those years, but it still seems to be a solid organization, and they're even in their down years, they don't seem to be that terrible. And they're rebuilding now. So it's I could see them making a lot of interesting moves and to build around Wemby. And that I agree with you. If they can get Hero, that's a good start. I mean, he's still really young, and he can be the second scoring option at least for now in San Antonio. So
Yeah, I'm pretty excited for San Antonio's future, especially since Wemby is obviously a rookie next year. He's going to be in a rookie deal for 4 years. So ideally, you would pair him with 2 or 3 max players, alongside of him, right? If you're trying to accelerate that process. So Hero could be the 4th best guy on the team in 2 years. So I really like that pairing. Wemby's going to have that back down game a little bit too. I know he shoots a ton on the perimeter as well, but so does Tyler Hero as well. So I mean, the more spacing that you can give Wemby at this stage, the better. But I just found it weird how everyone is treating Tyler Hero like he's 37-year-old Kyle Lowry. Like no one wants this guy right now. Like I can understand Portland doesn't want him right now. It doesn't really fit within the rebuild process, right? But everyone else they're talking to is like, nah, like we don't want Hero, right? And there's so many more worse contracts out there. I mean, he's making $27 million, on average for 4 years. Like that's not horrible in today's standards. And you touched on it, like what New York is paying, Randall, Barrett, and Co. compared to the free agency deals that we just saw this past
yeah,
weekend, right? We'll touch on that in a little bit too. But speaking of unmovable contracts, another piece of the puzzle here is Brooklyn in this 5 or 6 team deal, ideally, is trying to unload Ben Simmons, who's due $38 million and $40 million the next 2 seasons.
yeah. I mean, he gets paid a lot to sit on the sidelines,
It's
right? So
amazing.
what team wants to have him sit on the sidelines now?
Yeah, I just don't see where he's going to go. I saw some rumors that Miami could possibly, fix him. Like, if you're Miami, why do you want to pay him that money? That's going to lock you up, especially with the second apron. You already have Jimmy, you have Bam as well, too. You're going to have Lillard, too. So, what are you going to pay all 4 guys and pay tax out the ass, right? Yeah, I don't see like Ben Simmons in Portland, I think is a great fit because no one really cares about basketball in Portland. He'll have 2 years, I guess, to kind of figure it out. I don't see him resigning there. But yeah, I don't
Yeah, I don't
see
know,
how Ben
man.
Simmons gets unloaded here.
I don't know, man. Like whenever he has played, he's really good, right? He's a top tier defender at least. At worst, he's a lockdown defender. At best, he's a fast break specialist, great distributor, right? Maybe not a great rebounder. I get the criticisms about him scoring wise and limiting the offense, but I think it's all in his head at this point. And it just seems to be like another case of like the Kardashians messing with the head of some athlete or artist. So I think
Yeah.
somebody should look into that situation.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, like I said, former Sixer, like when he is on the court, he's not ineffective. I know he has probably some mental blocks there, or just doesn't feel like scoring. But I mean, if you're going to spend $30 million or $40 million in a given year and you're rebuilding, I mean, I think you could do a little bit worse than Ben Simmons if you're trying to figure out and get him back into form.
If he
Um,
plays, yeah, I agree with that.
exactly.
Yeah.
That's the big question mark, right? But yeah, that's another piece of this. I mean, I saw Brooklyn was trying to get Dame for a little bit. It doesn't seem like that's going to happen anytime soon. To me, it seems like it's Miami or Philly, honestly. And I'm not just saying that as a Sixers fan, as trying to, make that happen. But I just don't see any other teams that could realistically like just fit in Dame unless we're talking about Utah or San Antonio, right? On the last pod, I said I think Utah is its best fit because they don't have to give up any of their players that are in the starting lineup right now. They had 15 first round picks until 2030 or something like that. They can give 6 picks if they wanted to Portland, offset some cap. If you trade away Clarkson or whatever. I don't know who's tradable right now with the contracts. But Dame would be an awesome fit there, right? I mean, I'm not sure they win the championship, but they're going to be a contender in the West, in my opinion. But you go down the list of teams that can realistically fit in Dame right now, and the list gets short like very fast. So you have Miami, they have to offload Hero or Lowry. Philly has to offload Harris in that deal. Probably have to include Tyrese Maxey too. Like I said, Utah has those picks. Brooklyn, I don't see how they're going to fit him unless they trade away Simmons and Dinwiddie or other pieces there. And then San Antonio, but they're not going to win for a few years at best.
I mean, I'll throw one more team in there with an interesting situation, right? Like, what about Boston, right? They still have yet to sign Jaylen Brown to a long-term extension, right? So they could potentially trade Jaylen Brown for Dame Lillard is, one thing I could see.
It's a great point. Do you think
Because
Boston gets better in that scenario?
I do. I mean, I, Jaylen Brown was kind of exposed in the playoffs. Like he can't go left, and teams are attacking that. I think he's a great player, but I think him and Tatum are not really complementary, right? They are kind of the same type of player in a lot of ways, at least offensively. So I think it would, yeah, they would give up a bit on defense for sure, but Dame's 30 points a game nightly would free up Tatum to play a little more free possibly and not feel as much pressure because it's clear that the pressure has gotten to Tatum eventually each time they've made runs in the playoffs. He's done well, but then when the pressure really gets on him, he seems to have bad games. So maybe having Dame would take that pressure off him a bit.
I like the Boston idea just because, like, why isn't Jaylen Brown signed yet to his extension?
That's what I'm
You saw,
asking. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They
who do
clearly
we
are thinking
see?
about it, right? Yeah.
Who do we see last week? Pat LaMelo Ball, Anthony Edwards signing $260 million.
Yeah.
Right, over 5 years. Why isn't Jalen signed yet? Like there has to be something going on over there.
Yeah. No, I think they're probably considering trading him. That's probably, that has to be the answer. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just not convinced that Boston is better in that scenario. I agree with all the points that you made. I'm not saying that you're wrong here. My only hesitancy if I'm Boston is the age difference. What's Brown, like 6 or 7 years younger than Dame? So maybe, perhaps you're better for the next 2-3 years. But then after that, like what happens, right? And then we could play the what if games until we're blue in the face, obviously. But that to me, I wonder if Portland would have to give them more pieces, right? I think at this stage, believe it or not, that Jaylen Brown's trade value is higher than Damian Lillard's.
Yeah. I mean, we'll find out how teams are valuing Dame Lillard at this point, right? I mean, I think he's probably more valuable than Brown is, but we'll find out. I mean, your point about the age thing is totally valid, but does Boston really think like with Tatum and Brown together, like how many times have they given it a shot now, right? Do they really think that they can figure it out and get them over the hump, right? Or do they not?
Yeah.
Was this the final straw, right? They've tried two different coaches. They've tried, different role players. The same thing keeps happening. So maybe they want to change it up.
What I can't shake, Pat, is say Jaylen Brown signs this, was it 5 year, $295 million extension. What's stopping him from, if they fall short next season, asking out next summer? Right. And I think that's probably in Boston's head, right? Because you're seeing it all over. Example, Dame just signed an extension not too long ago. This wouldn't be the first time that this happens, right?
Yeah. No, I mean that could be the other side of it. Maybe he's not re-signed because he wants to leave, right? Maybe he's not agreeing to re-sign. So it could be that
Yeah.
too.
And I think that's a valid argument because of the next guy that we're talking about here, James Harden. So James Harden had a chance to extend in Brooklyn, and then a year later, like many of these guys, he could have asked for a trade, right? And I think his extension was something, like 4 years, 200 million or so, more than he's making this season and probably the rest of his career, per an annual basis here. So I just can't understand Harden right now, as far as he just diminished his value so much since he was traded to Brooklyn. Whether you agree, with him wanting out or not, whatever, like ignoring those factors, he could be playing for $40-50 million this upcoming season, and he's playing for 36 million. It's more than we make. That goes without saying, but
Yeah.
he just read this situation as wrong as you can read it. And now he's opted into his, final year, the 2-year contract, and he's a free agent next season. He wants to be traded to the Clippers per reports, and that inhibits his value as well, too, because the Clippers could be trading for him and he leaves the next summer. So what's your thoughts on that, Pat? I know it's a general question there, but this just tells me that his free agent market was dog shit.
Yeah, he hasn't proven that he can win in the playoffs either, right? Like I think that's what teams are thinking. They don't want to have him be the main option because he's not, capable of like improving the team around him the way some other players are. At this point of his career, there's question marks, right? Like, is he going to ever break out the fat suit, and then not look ready for the season? Like, is he going to start chucking up shots during the period of the season there goes my cat. Chucking up shots for a little bit, and lose 5-10 games in a row. Or is he going to look like he had for stretches in Philly where he's, playing as part of a team and he's distributing well, he's finding the open guy at the 3 line and he's driving and passing out. He's shown some progress, but he's also shown, that he's still unstable. So I wouldn't want to give up a lot for him. I think that's probably it at this point, right? Because number one, to your point, he's going to be very expensive, and similar to the Paul George situation, he's getting up there in age, and do you want to commit that much and lock your team into that player as they age, right? As a Knicks fan, I've seen them do that with plenty of superstars over my lifetime, and it never seemed to work out. So I don't think a lot of teams are looking to do that these days.
So you're saying the fat suit's coming out October if he's still on the roster, right? No, I joke about that, but it seems like he's going to return to Philly if I'm reading it right. It looks like the Clippers are not willing to get rid of Trey Mann in the trade talk. So I just don't see Daryl Morey, bringing back Marcus Morris and Nick Batum for James Harden, right? We saw this with the Ben Simmons situation. Morey waited that out, and it was uncomfortable. It was stressful as a Sixers fan. You're like, what's going on? I just don't see Morey giving him up for nothing.
I think if they do, then that's the pressure Embiid is going to put on them. Like, who knows, right? Like, I don't think Embiid would be happy if they get nothing back for Harden, and then he's playing with those players you mentioned. Like, maybe then he requests out. So
that's another thing that I'm thinking about as a Sixers fan, as an NBA fan too. I've been asked multiple times the past few days, like, would you trade Tyrese Maxey for Dame Lillard? So it's obviously not going to be a 1-for-1 trade. You're trading more. You have to trade Tobias as well. But would I make that trade? And I think there's 2 answers, and both are correct. So one, you could say Tyrese Maxey is 24 years old. Dame is close to 33 years old, right? So I also go back and forth because do I want to pay? And this is the same situation with Harden too. Do I want to pay Dame $60 million at 36, 37 years old, which is going to be the case with those huge extensions? So I would say no, considering all those factors. But then on the flip side, if you trade for Dame, you're committing to probably a 2 or 3 year window where you're most likely a contender. You would hope so with Embiid and Dame. And Embiid, you don't have to worry about him asking for a trade. And that's my fear, is that they don't make this trade. Harden, goes to LA or whatever. We don't get much back. And then in a year, Embiid's like, oh, I want out. And I can't blame him, right? Like, this is the second offseason where his leading playmaker, the guy who has the ball in his hands the most, wants out of the team.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I would trade for Dame, honestly.
And like, who knows what Embiid's window is too, right? Like, even though he's a little younger, his window might be 2 to 3 years also, right? With knowing how centers hold up over the years, you never know. So I think he's totally in win now mode is how he's thinking. So does he think he has a better chance to win with Dame than Maxey? I would say so. All right. So in the end, you got to keep your franchise player MVP, happy, right? So that I agree with you.
Yeah, I'm getting some text from my Sixers fans as we're talking about this. I'm getting some shit in my text. Look, what I'm saying,
I mean,
guys.
Maxi, I get it, right? Like he shoots the high percentage, he's very fast, he gives a lot of energy, but um, is he ever going to be Dame Lillard in the next few years at least? I don't think so. Uh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I love Tyrese Maxey, and I'm hoping he's a Sixer for the rest of his career. But that being said, guys, everyone in my chats right now, if you take Embiid off this roster right now, take a look at that roster. You have
I'm
Tyrese
saying.
Maxey, right? But what else is your future? And that's where I'm turning here. So I don't think there's any right or wrong answer. I can see the argument for both sides here. My biggest concern is Embiid walks in a year, and I would not blame him whatsoever. Like, I want to see him win more than anyone else in the league. And if they get nothing for Harden, I don't see how it's going to be fixable. The first stone that was thrown, the first bomb that detonated was Elton Brand choosing to listen to Ben Simmons and Brett Brown and trade Jimmy, right? And Daryl Morey has tried to clean it up, and Ben Simmons decided to quit on the team. Morey got an all-star caliber player in James Harden, and he took a swing, right? He made us competitive for a year, but now there's no plan B anymore. Like, the only realistic plan B that doesn't involve Dame would probably be DeMar DeRozan. So we keep trading a young player for an older player, and eventually you can't trade for a 40-year-old player in another year, right? So they're kind of stuck right now. So that's my little montage for the Sixers there. Um, but real quick, Pat, Tim Legler had a great segment on James Harden. I'm not usually an ESPN guy. I think those talking heads just want ratings, but I think he nailed what he said about James Harden in that if you think about the top 30 NBA players, and I think James Harden is in there, whether you think it's a fringe 30 or whatever, that's up to you. But he pointed out that if you're talking about these top 30 guys, their floor is not the floor that James Harden possesses, right? So you can talk about the Boston series, and he won probably single handedly almost two of those Boston games,
Oh yeah,
right? Scoring
yeah.
40 plus points. But in that same series, he also scored 9 points one night and 12 points one night in the same exact series. And that swing in consistency really hurts not only him, but the team. And my last point about that is he doesn't find his game in the fourth quarter. I go back to, what was it, game 5 when Tatum shoots what, 4 threes? No, game 6, right? Tatum shoots 4 threes and makes them in the last 5 minutes, even though he was like 3 for 20 up to that point. That's not James Harden. Like, if he's on or not in the first quarter. If he goes 0 for 4 in the first quarter, he's not going to turn it on second half. So I think that also inhibits his offense as well, too. And that's why, like, before we even got into all this, I wasn't worried about losing James Harden. It sucks that they're going to only save $8 million, if he signed somewhere else in free agency. Now you can trade him into an asset, but what is that asset going to be?
Yeah, good question. As much as I was on Tatum earlier about him like fading in the big moments, like Harden's even worse. I agree. Like historically in the playoffs, right? He just disappears. Ideally, in like a top, star player, you want them to have their great games, those 40-point games you mentioned. At least 4 games at a set in a 7-game series, they should be able to do that. Yeah, they're allowed to have 1 or 2 games off, right? And maybe somebody else could pick up the slack, whatever. But to be a star player, you need to have that consistency, right? And that's what I'm talking about when I talk about Tatum and Harden. Like they haven't done that, right? They have great, amazing games, right? But then they have down games where they're almost responsible for them losing too. So it's until those players, they're not going to win until they can get that consistency. Now, other teams in the NBA, I know probably think the same way, or they have to know that about the player, right? James Harden. So that's the situation we're in. That's why the Sixers are not probably going to be able to get a whole lot back for him, and it's why the Sixers also don't necessarily want to keep him either. And like, it's a shame. Like, maybe I thought, the Sixers had a great chance last year. I also, on the same token, thought that the reason why Embiid got MVP was because that last year was when he was the most responsible for their success, like single-handedly. Even though Harden was there, I feel like he really is the reason why they were winning games. So They blew the game in Game 6. Who knows what would have happened if they won that game, moved on and played Miami. Who knows, right? Denver might have still beat them, but the outlook would have been a lot better. Now, why does Harden want out? You got to ask that guy, but I don't see him in Los Angeles having a better chance than he had in Philly, to be honest. So
Yeah, I think he's just going somewhere where he thinks he's going to get paid. The Clippers obviously don't care about health. If you miss half the season, they'll still pay you, right? But they just resigned Russell Westbrook too, and you texted me about that as well. I mean, it's a very team-friendly deal. $8 million, not even for 2 years, right? But I don't see how linking up Harden and Westbrook for the third time in their careers is going to lead to a championship. Like, honestly, if you're going to trade for someone and pay them $30 million, you can find better options, right? So yeah, I think the Sixers are a little bit stuck right now. Just lastly, because you brought up great points about like the game 6, they're up about 5 with like 4 minutes left or so. The Sixers are, and Embiid's getting tripled, quadrupled if you're watching the game, and you have James Harden, former MVP and all-star, and he looks like he doesn't even want to be on the court. He's just deferring to everyone. So I guess going back to the Maxey point that you made as well too, if you would trade, for Dame, like the Sixers need that closer, and they lost that heavily with Jimmy Butler. So I would love to have Dame on this team and be able to close games. I think that's the most important thing. But Dame seems like he's pretty set on Miami, so I'm honestly interested to see what happens with that. I think this is going to, take a while on his end, at least. I think he'll be traded before Harden if I had to put money on it. But I don't think Dame's traded probably until mid-August or so.
yeah, no, they're at a standstill for sure.
Talk about this other guy, Pat. So this was recently brought up today. We haven't even had a chance to connect on this one, but Pascal Siakam. So rumors are swirling about him potentially being traded to the Hawks in exchange for DeJounte Murray and maybe other assets. We don't know the whole deal right now. But this comes after reports that Siakam and Fred VanVleet, who we're going to discuss later because I'm still trying to wrap my brain around that contract. Siakam and Fred VanVleet were not happy with how the young Raptors played last season. So it seems like Toronto is going for the rebuild. They have Scotty Barnes, so they have a piece that they can at least build around. They're not completely lost there. But Siakam, I'm just thinking about, he's an interesting player because like when he's on, like he's actually pretty fun to watch. Some days he has maybe 18 points, 16 points, has a quiet game, and then he might hit 7 threes in one game, the next game too. So where do you think he fits? Because I think Atlanta, they just lost John Collins. Like that's an easy, obvious fit to me. I think that's like kind of cheating on your homework, right? And the rumor involves Atlanta. But I honestly think, and some people call me nuts, I think he'd be pretty cool to see on Dallas and help out Luka and Kyrie.
Yeah, no, I agree on Dallas. Like, who would they be able to trade for him though? You know,
That's the thing,
so
right? Like, so DeJounte Murray, he can at least shoot. He belongs on a crappy team where he could shoot 20 shots a game, as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, I guess like Dallas, maybe Josh Green, who looks like a promising young player, and then
yeah,
you kind of like fill. I mean, you're taking scraps at this point, right? But then like if you're weighing it, and this is just me, the way that I think, like, do I want DeJounte Murray, who I know what he's going to be like? You talk about a guy that can shoot 15 for 18 or 7 for 18 on a given night. Like you have no idea. Like he's a great playmaker, but he doesn't seem like he's going to be a winning playoff guy, and we have that question mark with Harden too. So I just
I
think
don't know.
Luka
I
needs
mean,
more help.
that's definitely how he's looked in Atlanta, but in San Antonio, he looked a whole lot different, right? So I don't know. Like, if I'm the Hawks, right, I almost would rather keep him and get rid of Trey Young, right? So
Wow. Okay.
maybe trade
There we
Trey Young
go.
for Siakam is what I think Toronto would fall for that, and then I think it'd be in Atlanta's best interest to do that. So
Insert atomic bomb sound, right? I love it. Pat is rolling the dice today. He's wheeling and dealing right now.
yeah,
Um,
I mean, you don't agree? Trey Young, sure he could score. I think but he's like the smallest guy on the court, right? Like I don't think he can really assert himself. Uh, can he hit from half court over and over again consistently enough? Maybe some years yes, other years definitely not. So um, I also think he's fairly unlikable. So just from my
Yeah, no, I mean,
perspective, so
you
maybe
had
his
him playing
teammates
the
might not,
Knicks when he played the Sixers. I couldn't stand him either, and he would just like bump into guys, randomly, and he'd have the foul called.
Yeah,
Which it seems like this year the flopping they actually have a rule to where the other team gets a free throw. So
I
that's going
saw
to be
that in
interesting.
summer
Yeah.
league. Yeah, I mean,
Um,
maybe they want to jump ahead of that and get rid of their flopper, and
Yeah, exactly. But going back to your point, I mean, I'm not disagreeing with you on that. I think Trey Young, he does a lot of things on the court, but he seems like a DeJounte Murray, right? He seems like a James Harden to where like on a given night he's on or he's off. Now, what I will say about Trey, and I think he gets a ton of shit for this, which he shouldn't, his floor is like 17, 18 points because if he's shooting, 3 for 20, he's still getting to the free throw line. Now, whether it's an
through
actual foul
flopping.
or not,
Yeah,
debatable, right? But what I'm
right.
saying is that's what bothers me about Harden. Like you can't put up 9 points in a playoff game. Like I
Yeah,
don't want to see that as a
yeah.
as a fan. Not to mention, I don't want to see you only take 9 or 10 jump shots in a game too, or field goals total, right? Um, you're probably sick of me, sick of me saying this too. I bring them up almost every episode. You can tell that I'm a huge fan of what they're doing. But Utah would be a great fit for Trey Young. He's the smallest guy on the court, but every other guy in that starting lineup is 6'9" plus, right? Like you have compensation defensively for Trey Young. But it seems like Atlanta is going to build around Trey Young. They're going to give that another whirl there, but we'll see what happens. He's just one of those players that I'm not excited to hear about when the trade rumors are swirling.
Yeah, if he doesn't get traded this year, I think they're going to stick with him, right? Um, if they're really looking at Siakam, I kind of like that. If they can trade either one of them, I would probably do it. Um, but I would personally trade Trey Young. Is all I'm saying. So
Yeah, like I'm just shocked now that we're talking about it too. If you're LA, they're trying to make moves, right? Like, why aren't you trying to trade for Siakam right now? If you're gonna put
Lakers,
30
you mean,
plus
or
the Clippers, if you're
the
trying to
Clippers?
spend 30 plus million on a player, example will be Harden. If you're trying to acquire Harden, right? Why not try to get Siakam instead? You could play like a small lineup, and he's going to deliver more playoff performances than Harden is.
I don't know. I feel like Toronto doesn't want to trade players away for nothing, right? And any trade discussions I ever see Toronto involved in, they usually want a lot, right? Um, they're not just trying to rebuild, they're trying to keep their team competitive every year. So I think that's part of it. I know the Knicks were looking at trading with Toronto for OG Anunoby, right? They probably still are. The asking price is probably absurd for even him. And Siakam's considered better than him, right? So I can only imagine what they want back for that guy. That's why I'm thinking they would fall for like a big name like Trey Young. You know, they could potentially fall for that, although I think he's overrated at this point.
Right.
Atlanta should jump on that, and especially if they're implementing flopping penalties. And
I'm excited to see that
yeah.
next season.
I don't know if they're putting it in the actual games this year. I don't know if it goes well in summer league. Are they going to put it in this season? Is that how
From
it
what I
works?
read,
Or?
and I could be completely wrong on this, you can check my sources. It sounds like they're going to implement this for the regular season, but it's going to be like
Oh,
on a per game or per week basis. Like they can make changes whenever they want. It's going to be
what?
pretty fluid. Yeah.
Wow,
Um, yeah.
wow.
So I
That
can't wait. I mean,
seems
well,
that's wild. I don't know
I
about
think it's
that.
I think it's a great move in the right direction. But now are we going to see double flops? Right. Like, are we going to see the inverse effect of it to where it's like, why is that guy flopping now too? Like when the other guy's flopping, right? So I don't know. I'm just getting down the rabbit hole here, but it's the right move. I
That's
think it's going to
hilarious.
be
Yeah,
a good direction there.
negating flop fouls. So.
Exactly. Like we're gonna see something weird to where the rule needs to be tinkered. Like I'm telling you, it's gonna happen.
Yeah,
I don't
you're
think it's
probably
gonna be
right.
smooth to begin with, even though it should be.
Yeah.
But we'll see what happens with that. Let's discuss the next guy. I'm really excited about this because I texted you about this rumor that I saw. So apparently, Paul George was offered to the Knicks, and the Knicks
Oh
declined
yeah.
the trade. So I'll just lay out the trade really quick, Pat. You can give me your thoughts because I'm eager to hear everything about it. But the Knicks were set to receive Paul George, and the Clippers were set to receive RJ Barrett, who's like 9 years younger, if 10 years younger, maybe, Quinn Grimes, Evan Fournier, and 3 first-round picks. Now, the other kicker was Paul George, if he went to the Big Apple, he wanted an extension, a 4-year, $220 million extension. and he's what 32 or 33 years old now. Pat, your thoughts on this? I'm pretty happy for you that they declined this.
No, I'm thrilled that they didn't do that. Yeah, I mean, it shows that the Knicks are in a new era. All the assumptions all of you out there might have about the Knicks, you can get rid of them because the people running the team right now are not running the team into the ground, right? Paul George can be, I think he can contribute to a championship team, right? I do not think he's good for the Knicks, however, especially maybe if he comes in and plays with RJ Barrett and Quentin Grimes, that's another story. But when you're trading away two starters that got you to the second round of the playoffs and getting Paul George in exchange, is that really a good trade? Does that really benefit the team? RJ Barrett, like you said, he's 23 years old still, right? Some of these players that are superstars didn't even start playing in the NBA until they were 23, right? I feel like we don't really know what we're going to get from RJ Barrett completely yet, right? Like I'm hearing reports that he's gotten taller even this offseason. Like he's like 6'9", which I'm hesitant to believe, but if that's true, that, that I feel like his finishing at the basket might get better. Um, it's just absurd to think like, just from the Clippers' perspective, to want that much back from a player that also is demanding an extension. Why don't you see that happening with all these other trades going on with players that want extensions, sign in trades, all this crap, right? Like, why is it every time the Knicks are involved with a trade, these teams want to extort them, right? And get all their young players that have shown anything in order to give them any player in return. So I'm glad that they aren't doing it. I think we're in a good trading position, right? We have a lot of young talent. We have a lot of picks. Um, I think we're waiting for the right opportunity, right, and the right player. And I agree with you. Paul George is not it, especially for that price. So we'll wait till the next chance. We're good enough. I'm fine with running it back, and with the team we have now, I was um, upset about us getting rid of Obi for nothing, but I guess it led to us getting DiVincenzo, right? So we'll see. I think he's a great pickup. So
Great signing. We're going to cover that soon
yeah,
too. I thought that was an
okay,
awesome signing. I was waiting to see where he went.
yeah. I'm learning nowadays, right, with this Knicks what do you general manager and president and everything, right? You kind of almost know when the Knicks are definitely almost tampering and getting a player at this point. And that just like Brunson last year, it was DiVincenzo this year. So they're Villanova Knicks now. So
Yeah. So are the Knicks, are they lined up to sign Jay Wright next season? Is that what you're hearing?
he's probably an unofficial consultant already, right? So they
I'm
probably don't even have to
sure.
pay him. So,
But speaking real quick, Pat, of the report that he might be taller, just check that. There's been so many players this season that have had that tweet about them. That's not like a unrealistic, I guess, growth. He gained what, like an
yeah,
inch or two. But I
yeah.
saw one speaking to Trey Young. It's like, oh, Trey Young grew over the summer, and then it's like, oh, like Pascal Siakam said, oh, he's 7'2" now. It's hilarious. Like I'm like, okay, like fantastic. So it's gonna be Wemby and Trey at
So
the
this
basket
where
every
where I
possession.
heard that though, it was it was Julius Randle, I think, or some other Knicks player on a podcast said that. So it's like
Okay,
that's the
so
only
there's
reason I
some
mentioned
credible
it.
sources. Okay.
Yeah. So
So that's all. I can't remember who the player was. It's gonna piss me off. But Perk on ESPN claimed that someone got taller that he saw a report, and it was like some parody account. And I'm like, you're an idiot. Like I can't. Which like I don't know how you don't fact check that.
yeah, I mean, I know I saw a clip of a player saying it. So I mean, I hope it's true. I hope RJ obviously ends up being like an all-star caliber player, but at worst, what he's shown so far, I think is pretty good. 20 a game, shoots a pretty good. He's improved his field goal percentage each year. One year he shot 40% from three, so he plays decent defense most of the time. Give me him over Paul George at this point for sure. Like for the price that we're paying him, give me RJ Barrett.
yeah, I think another great point that many of the talking heads are not considering is like Jalen Brunson had a career year last year running that offense, right? Like that's what he's meant to do. And then obviously Randall and Barrett, they're no punks either, right? So why, if you're the Knicks, would you trade away Barrett, who's what, 23 or 24, whatever he is? Like he has so much more in front of him for Paul George, who, like, I'm not saying I dislike Paul George, when he's healthy, and that's the huge question mark. I think he can perform very well, but he's going to want his 20 shots per game, 18 field goals, whatever that is, right? So if Brunson, I've watched many Knick games last, season. Brunson might shoot 7 in a row, but he's not a Paul George or a Jason Tatum where he's just shooting to get them up. Like they're great quality shots. So I don't see Paul George being on the wing as much as he wants to win a championship that he claims. I don't see him just waiting on the wing and watching Brunson take over in fourth quarters either. So I think that could have been like a personality, mismatch, in my opinion, to be in the Big Apple.
Yeah, and does he want to play for a coach like Thibodeau at this point of his career? Does he want to, put defense first? I doubt it. You're right. Is he going to be missing 30, 40 games a year during the season and then most of the playoffs too? Like, you can't have that. So
Not at all. Yeah. I mean,
uh,
and George is 33 years old right now. I did the math. So his 4-year extension will kick in after this next season. So 4 years after next season, you would be paying him about $63 million at 37 years old for a guy that hasn't played more than 56 games in the last 4 years.
yeah, I mean, he's not even as close to as good as Melo was when the Knicks traded for Melo, right? And I think he's a few years older probably also, but that didn't work for the Knicks. So I think they've learned, hopefully, finally, and they're not going to trade away their promising young players for an aging superstar. So I'm happy about it.
Can I make one last Paul George point here? Today is the anniversary of the infamous Paul George trade to the Clippers. OKC, what they got in that haul. I'm gonna read. I have the screenshot right here. They got Shai Gilgeous-Alexander,
Yeah,
and they got more. So ready? Danilo Gallinari, and they
yeah.
got 7. They got 7 first-round picks for that
That they
trade for
haven't
Paul
used yet.
George.
Like they haven't used any of those picks, or
1 or maybe 2, if that. I don't know if they deferred. 2 max. It looks like
okay.
absolutely insane. And SGA was just first team All NBA this
Yeah,
past season.
he's amazing. Yeah. No,
And he's like, what, 24, 25 years old? Like, come on.
Clippers would have been better off with him last year than Paul George, based on how much Paul George played. So
What an
I
insane
don't
haul.
know.
So talk about the Thunder. And back, my last point about Dame here. The Thunder did not do what Paul George wanted them to do. Paul George for years was adamant that he wanted to go back home and play in front of the LA crowd. And then I think it was Sam Presti at the time, who was the GM of the Thunder. I'm not sure if he's still there or not. He traded him, but he got this, or sorry, I'm talking about Indiana. So Indiana traded him to OKC instead of sending him to LA initially, right? And you see the ripple effects of that is what Indiana and what OKC got out of those trades. I mean, valuable trades, right? So I'm looking at Portland right now, and like you can get a huge haul for Dame if you play it right. It's not going to be the sexiest package alive, but you're going to get more than Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson, and maybe 2 first. So I've said this many times on this episode, but I can't wait to see what Portland decides to do. And I think an interesting aspect of the trade is they're not like the Knicks. They're not like the LAs. They're not like Philly, Miami, right? To where they have to maintain this reputation of treating players right, or else they're not going to go there because no one wants to go to Portland anyway. So,
Yeah.
like you said, showdown, fun to watch. My last aim point, and I'm done with that. But let's talk real quick, Pat, about free agency because there were some crazy contracts out there that I saw. I want to hear 2 to 3 free agency signings that you love the most. But can I first bring up Jeremy Grant? Speaking of the Portland Trailblazers, so I'm led to believe that Dame pretty much told them he was leaning on leaving. Like no one was going to willingly sign with Portland. Draymond Green signed with the Warriors right away as soon as free agency started. So like that pipe dream to him going to the Blazers and joining Dame and Grant was indeed a pipe dream. But Jeremy Grant signs 5 years, $160 million. That is gross. Gross. And then Dame requested that trade, and Portland says they're going to keep that contract for Grant. Why on earth would you want to sign Jeremy Grant to 5 years, $160 million, and you're going to rebuild?
I'm speechless. I don't have an answer for you there. I mean, he's got the highest value contract of any of the free agents, right? And I mean, I think it's for 5 years, but which is to me is even worse because then you can't trade him on an expiring deal for 4 more years. So, I mean, on a per year basis, that's like 30, 32 a year.
For a non-all-star, right?
For somebody who's already in his 30s, I think, or is about to be 30. He's shown like he can play, but yeah, I don't know how many players are going to want to play with him as the second option. Um, no, I don't. Maybe what they're thinking is these players they drafted are going to end up being, superstars, and then Jeremy Grant will win with them. We'll see, but yeah, I don't like it. I don't like it either.
What moves did you love, Pat, off the bat?
I mean, to be honest, it was surprisingly a little unexciting, right? A lot of the free agents ended up re-signing with their teams, which is not necessarily a bad thing, right? The teams just didn't get any better or worse, which is why I say it's unexciting. But you mentioned Draymond. I like that for Golden State, obviously, right? Resigning him on a team-friendly deal, right? From what I've heard, that was key for them having another shot at winning a championship next year. The minute they traded Jordan Poole, I thought, that's definitely happening.
You called that.
I think it's a good signing for them. After him, we mentioned DiVincenzo. Like, I mean, I'm being a homer on this, but I don't care. DiVincenzo, you heard nothing but, Golden State Warriors fans raving about this guy all last year, right? He'd come in and give energy, hitting deep threes, right? He extends the court. Like I don't think he learned that from Curry, but he at times looked just as good as Curry, hitting
Right.
like threes 5 feet below, 5 feet behind the 3-point line. So that clears the paint, that opens up the offense. He plays defense really well also. He's going to mesh with the Josh Hart and Brunson right off the bat. It's not going to take as long as it would other players to get into the culture of the team because he knows a few of the leaders of the team. He already is friends with them, right? I like that signing a lot for those reasons. The third one, I got to say, Bruce Brown, right? Like him going to Indianapolis. I like that signing just because he's going to bring championship experience now to this team and give them a veteran leadership presence. Show the rest of the players how they need to work to succeed, and really create a good culture for that team.
No, I love that actually. Yeah, I think that's an underappreciated signing because you're looking at the money and people are like, "Oh, like I'm not paying Bruce Brown 22, 23 million to come here," but like you're not a destination city, right? In
Yeah,
Indianapolis. So Indiana getting him was huge in my opinion. I could not agree more with that. It's opening the door for other free agents to possibly go in the next few years. I'm not saying that everyone's going to pack their bags to be a Pacer, right? But it's at least making that attractive going forward. It really reminds me, and there's other examples, but immediately off the bat, being from Philly, reminds me of the Phillies when Bryce Harper signed here. Now, Bryce Harper was a bigger name, better player, more respected than Bruce Brown, obviously. But once Bryce came here, free agents started wanting to come here or be traded here, right? So
yeah,
I can see Indiana just building something nice there, and it's only for 2 years too. So if it doesn't work out, Bruce Brown can be traded on an expiring contract next year too. So very low risk, big reward there. Other signings that I like to, so I'll give you the two boring ones really quick. So Chris Middleton resigns with Milwaukee for 3 years, 102 million, and then Draymond Green you brought up 4 years, 100 million. And I love those signings not because they were shocking or because these players are going to be MVP next season, but those teams that I mentioned had no other option to keep their championship core, in my opinion. If Draymond's not a Warrior, they're not making it to the finals whatsoever next year, in my opinion. If the Bucks don't resign Middleton, they have nowhere to pivot to. Like the free agency pool this year was awful compared to
yeah.
previous years. So I love that those teams kept the culture, they kept those players that they've won with as well. And then lastly, probably surprising for many people, but Eric Gordon, right? Him signing with Phoenix was huge because of their depth concerns. He brings, some playoff experience too, where he's had some big moments. He's been on a lot of shitty teams the last few years too. So he only signed for, I think, 2 years, 7 or 8 million as well too. Just a steal for Phoenix right there to put along their big four.
Yeah, I think we're going to see a few signings like that on Phoenix of players like, towards the end, back into their careers that are willing to take pay cuts, and like Russell Westbrook just did with LA.
Yep.
I think we're going to see some of that with Phoenix as the offseason goes on. So they'll figure it out. But what do you think about Max Strus going to Cleveland? Like he's probably going
Interesting.
to.
I don't know. Like, I'm not gonna sit here and pretend that I watch a ton of Cavaliers basketball. I love that they traded for Donovan Mitchell. Thought that was a great piece there. But I mean, they have plenty of shooters. Max Strus can shoot lights out too. I just don't think that necessarily moves the needle. But with these prices that we've seen, which we're going to get into in 1 second here too, I mean, Max Strus on his deal is pretty cheap, right? I think it's like 13 or 14 million per year, if I'm not mistaken. So to have a shooter like that, which you don't have a lot of players like that in the league now that shoot at that clip, it could be a discount. But I just don't know what direction they're going to go in until they trade Jarrett Allen, who I'm seeing is on the trade block, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, what shooters would they have already? Because that's where they were coming from, is adding more shooting, I think, right? Like I know
Yeah,
they had the redheaded guy, I think, right? But in the playoffs, when they played the Knicks, that's what they were missing. They were missing 3-point shooting. So
no, that's a great point. You have Osman, you have Mitchell, you have Garland too, which there was some report that they were trying to trade him, but supposedly that was bogus there. No, like Strus is a great signing. He can play defense, at a pretty decent clip as well too. So I mean, it's a great sign and trade. It was surprising that he went there to me out of all places, but I also don't watch a ton of Cleveland games, to be honest with you.
yeah, I just think they don't have a lot of cap space, right? So they tried to find the most effective player they could and still improve their team because, they lost in the first round. So
Yeah, I mean, big question marks for Miami if they don't land Dame because Strus went to Cleveland and Gabe Vincent went to LA, which I thought that was a pretty good deal for them. Whether or not you think they overpaid or not, I don't have an answer for you. I think you're entitled to that opinion there. But Miami is really short right now as far as their guard play, in my opinion. Um, so you brought up, Phoenix being a destination. I think in February we'll be talking about a lot of guys being bought out that want to go to Phoenix, right? I don't necessarily think that's going to be the case for Miami if they don't land Dame because they're kind of stuck if they don't get Dame right now. Like all the chips are forced right now into the middle of the table for Dame. So yeah, I thought Gabe Vincent going to LA was pretty good. I thought LA had a pretty good offseason, all things considered, too. I mean, they have a really deep team. Health is going to be their biggest concern, right? But what really shocked me,
I mean, one more point on that.
yeah,
It's interesting to see teams like Miami missing out on players. I'm kind of happy to see that. Things are changing a little bit, right? Like I would have thought Miami would have been the spot for like DiVincenzo, for instance, right? In years past, right? But I think we're seeing things move around the league now, which is exciting. It's an exciting time in the NBA. So
yeah, I mean, that's going to be something to where if they land Dame, they're geniuses, and if they don't, they're idiots because they did not really enter free agency, right? They put that on hold until Dame is figured out, and they missed out on a ton of players. So one of those players that I was really shocked to hear signed for this money was Fred VanVleet. So Fred VanVleet, he can shoot lights out when he's on, but 3 years, 130 million in Houston. I know the Rockets have a tax per se to pay to lure star players or all-star caliber players there. But $130 million for 3 years, he's going to be the 14th highest paid player next season.
no, I think that deal and the Jeremy Grant deal had to do with the rule that you mentioned last episode, where teams have to be a certain amount below their budget,
Right,
right?
the
They
floor,
they
yep.
have to they have to hit the floor. I think that was part of it, especially his deal with it only being 3 years for 43. He's making more money than Kyrie Irving. I don't. Yeah, I think that had to do with it. I think you're right about getting them to come to Houston. They had to pony up the money too. Um, and they also signed Dylan Brooks too, right, in Houston. So it'll
Dude,
be
that's
interesting to
$20 million
see. Yeah,
per year.
they must have had no one on their roster. So um, who who else is on their team? Jalen Green, right? He's their young player. You know, there's videos of him going around online, and stuff.
Yep.
Like I don't see Houston being a competitive team in the West. Maybe they get in the playoffs, but you know, with these two signings, I saw you share something earlier about their shooting percentage, right? Maybe they miss James Harden at this point, just chucking up shots everywhere. They're like, we want to reminisce about the D'Antoni days of rushing up the court and chucking up shots everywhere.
So for our listeners, Pat's referring to this tweet that I saw on Twitter, and it was Dylan Brooks miss. I'm sorry. How should I say this? Dylan Brooks took the most shots last year and missed the most shots last year, percentage wise, among every player in the league, aside from one player, Fred VanVleet, and they're now teammates. So I thought that was pretty interesting. I mean, I hope that they would have better shot selection on the Rockets, but Houston's another one to me too. Like, I'm not gonna say they're in the same boat as Cleveland. Like, Cleveland has a bona fide star in Mitchell, but the Rockets pretty much have too many talented players on their roster, if that makes sense. Like, I'm not sure everyone's gonna pan out to be a star, obviously, but they have too many guys that on a given night can score 20 or 30 and take 20 shots. I think the locker room is too full, in my opinion. So now you have Fred VanVleet, you have Dylan Brooks too, Jalen Green, as you mentioned, like Kevin Porter Jr. took 15 shots a game last year. And they also have Alperen Sengun, who was like a triple double machine to end the season last year. I don't know what's going to happen with him there as well. Yeah, I don't know what their direction is. And they have Jabari Smith Jr., who was the second overall pick, last draft as well too. So
Yeah.
it's just too full there. I want to know who your guys are going forward, because you can't tell me that you have 7 stars. It's not going to work out. Everyone needs to know their role, right? So we'll see what happens. They just drafted Amen Thompson too. I would expect them to move on from a couple of these guys this offseason or next, honestly.
Do you think any of these teams might be already trying to position themselves to draft freaking Bronny James to get LeBron next year? You know what I'm saying?
It's a
Like,
good point. Yeah. I
uh,
saw, speaking of that, not to interrupt you, Pat, but there's a couple of teams that are already scouting him.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't.
It's, but are they really like signing these players with the idea of tanking next year, right?
Yeah.
Getting a high enough pick and then having LeBron sign with them by default, right? And putting together a good enough roster with LeBron, to possibly win, right?
Oh, yeah.
Um,
Forgive me too. So Bronny James has been scouted. I'm talking about Bryce James. I just saw a tweet on that. So he's still in high
oh,
school,
okay.
and there's still I think I saw 8 NBA teams that are just already on his tail right now. So yeah, what if LeBron plays to 45 and just plays with his 2 sons? Where is he gonna go? This is the TV that I want to see.
Yeah, I don't know. There's I've heard Bryce James might be even better than Bronny.
He
Like maybe,
looks better
yeah,
at this age, in my opinion. I am no NBA scout, but he's also a lot taller too. I think he's 6'6" or 6'7" already. Bronny looks like an NBA player. He has the build for it, but he looks
yeah.
like he's going to be a complimentary role player, honestly.
Mm,
And if he turns
interesting.
into a star, then I'm wrong, right? But if I was a scout, I'd probably value Bryce James more.
Yeah, there's some exciting high school players around now, so it's cool. I mean, we had
Yeah.
Wembanyama just come out, but next year I think will be interesting too. So, what's the other guy's
And
name? Mikey Williams, I think,
yep.
is the other big top player. So,
But I was going to bring up scouts as well as my eyes were wrong sometimes. Look at Jalen Brunson. Everyone said that he was too short, right? And he's dominating in New York right now. So Bronny, let's see what happens with him. He's definitely going to have LeBron by his side, in my opinion. I don't think LeBron's going to, re-sign with the Lakers if
yeah,
Bronny is somewhere else.
I mean that was my point. Is no matter how good or good he isn't, he is or is not, right? LeBron is going to play with him. So your team is going to get better if you draft him high, even though he might not be good. So
Yep. So yeah, just to round this off, Pat, just more notable signings. Kyle Kuzma re-signed with the Washington Wizards, so he's going to join Jordan Poole in winning 15 total games next season with the Washington Wizards.
I
And
think a
then
little
can't.
more than that, but
I don't know. My buddy actually asked me because he was looking at FanDuel the other day. Like, if Jordan Poole averages 30 points a game next
yeah.
season, is he the most improved player? Right. And it's interesting because like he's probably going to shoot 20, 25 shots per game, and he might even score 30 points a game. But
No,
can you
I
win
think
that
he
award winning
absolutely could.
15,
Yeah.
20 games?
Uh,
That's
if
my
he
thing.
scores, I mean, 30 points a game, I think they're going to win more games than that. But can he win it based off of comparing to last year alone? Because the year before he played as big of a role of anyone on that team of them winning the championship, right? So, um, what are we comparing his most improved player to? Last year only, when he had the controversy with Draymond, the whole team hates him, right?
Yeah.
Are we just is he really that improved? So I think that would be more of the question mark about winning it. But I think, if you want predictions on that situation, I see him getting in the All-Star game at
Dude, that was
least.
my next point. Is he going to be an
Uh,
all-star? And I asked that because Michael Bridges, who's the favorite to win most improved, he's going to be an all-star next year.
oh yeah, I mean, if he plays a whole season like he did, on the Nets towards the end of the second half of the year, I agree with that 100%. He's great. You know, it's funny. Like Josh Hart tweeted at him, when they signed DiVincenzo, because he's the he's the last missing Villanova piece for the Knicks. But the Nets don't want to trade him because they see like his potential, and they don't have a lot of other options. So
Right.
yeah.
Interested to see you down the road, but I'm going to leave our listeners with this, Pat. So I put this on my big board here. Fred VanVleet, one more time, is going to be the 14th highest paid player in the league next season. Players he's making more money than next season: Anthony Davis, Luka, Trae Young, Jamal Murray, Gilgeous Alexander, Donovan Mitchell, Jason Tatum, and De'Aaron Fox. Vomit.
And Kyrie Irving, put
And
that in there.
Kyrie Irving. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
I mean,
that's a great
slightly
point
more.
too, right? If you told me 4 years ago that Fred VanVleet was going to be paid more annually than Kyrie Irving, I would have laughed at you.
It's absurd. Yeah, I mean, it's absurd. I mean, I don't like. I said that already in the past episode. Is Kyrie and Luka together is not great, but if we're talking Kyrie alone, basketball wise, he's got probably the best handles in the NBA. So
He's so fun to watch, regardless of what you think of him. Like, no one
yeah,
moves like him. So
yeah.
we'll see what happens with that. Maybe they'll add Siakam by our next episode. That's my prediction here. I'm sticking to it.
Let's
But
go. Yeah.
But Pat, always a pleasure, brother. Hopefully this is wishful thinking as well. Maybe Dame moves by next episode too. I just want to, get some more news on that there. But
We'll
had a
see.
blast with you as always, guys. Thanks for listening. Exciting news. Our website was created, so we are now eligible to be on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, as well as other platforms too. So look out for this episode. It's probably going to be on other platforms besides YouTube. And then going forward, please comment, like, subscribe, and just let us know if there's any topics, questions you want answered as well too. We love doing this. So, Pat, thanks as always, brother. I will talk to you next time.
Thank you, Brian. Like and subscribe.
See you, Pat.
See ya.